I also have a riding crop just in case.
I'm going to leave that on the video. It's recording. so there we go. We mean business today. Yeah, so this is recording. So it's raining outside, so we're inside. In case you don't know who we are, this is Dr. Stephen Hartman. My name's Meringolo, and so this is basically at the request of my mother, it's a belated Mother's Day present.
Oh,
yeah.
Happy Mother's Day, Mom.
It's all about kind of opening the inner groins, the adductors and abductors. So I'm actually going to have you get started lying on your back, and I think today just going to do it more Hatha style, and I'm going to go on a little diatribe first, or a little monologue here. Hatha, right? Not Hatha, Hatha, right? In Hatha, actually, almost. And you know, the idea is it's called, you know, it's to strike with force. That's the actual translation. It's not gentle. The sun and moon stuff came afterwards. Think Anahata, right? The unstruck chakra, right? Heart chakra, fourth chakra, Hatha, right? So it's a little bit more of a forceful practice. And to be honest, this stuff is a derivative of the OG Hatha. But I'll leave that to like James Mallinson and Mark Singleton and people like Richard Rosen. Stephen's on his back. He's gonna let his left leg extend to the end of the mat. And actually, you know what? Take both legs to the ceiling to start, right? And take the strap. You can take it around the balls of your feet. Here's the deal. Those of you that are taller might utilize like a 10-foot strap. This is, I believe, an 8-foot strap. So I'm just having him just lie on his back, legs to the ceiling, and immediately, and this is just so great to see. Right, you'll see he's got the natural curve of his low back. He's making sure he establishes it. It's like his tail curls up a little bit, so he's gonna, you know, press your pubic bone to the mat. Legs might go forward. Here's the deal. You know, what you want to do is you want to get your spine in its natural curve. Your shoulders are out of your ears. Right. So the idea is you can begin to open your hamstrings here. You're not rounding your low back. Those of you with tighter hamstrings, your legs will not go this high. Mine don't go this high most of the time to start. Right, and then, you know, keep pressing through your big toe ball mounts. And when I say legs to the ceiling, you might actually have to lower your heels 10 inches, 12 inches in some cases, right? And then what you'll find is, oh, it's like, oh, here's more the natural curve of his back, right? So he's gonna leave his legs here. He's gonna press a little bit more through the inner heel and peel the outer edge of the foot back. Press your low ribs down. So there's a little bit of upper abdominal work. Right? And then shoulders out of the ears towards your hips. You see that really broad, prominent heart center on the Hatha, right? The unstruck chakra, right? And that's from the 7 chakra system. There are many chakra systems. You know, they have the wheels of life. What's it called in was it the Kabbalah? In Judaism?
I don't know.
So there are many of those systems. So it's not just one system. Right, so you see, maybe he can press through his big toe ball mounts, take his legs a little higher, right, without rounding his back. So even though his legs are lifting, it's only hip flexion. He's only folding from his hips. His pubic bone's pressing down, his tailbone's lengthening. He's breathing, I hope. He's not turning blue in the face, so it's all right, right? Wah, wah. And just keep your right leg where it is. Slip your left foot out, and then slowly let your left leg extend to the end of the mat. So Supta Padangusthasana 1, right? And you can, I don't know if you can tell from this angle, and it's marginal in his case. Most of you will need to pull your left hip to your left shoulder, and that right hip pulls away. Again, one time. Pull your right hip away. Yes, right? So he gets very square through the hips. Most of you will need to do this. There's this tendency to kind of lift up and everything kind of splays. So what you're doing is you're hugging that right hip down to the end of the mat, hugging your outer left hip in. Right? And your left thigh is rolling in, your tail's lengthening. Spread your toes. Pressure your right big toe ball mount, maybe right leg lifts a little bit higher. Just notice those shoulders, do they creep towards your ears? Right? And then, you know, just take both ends of the strap into your right hand. And here's where the inner groin stuff starts to kind of show up a little bit. Spin your right toes out. So your right leg, other way. Yeah. So your right knee points out, your right toes press to your big toe ball mound. Try not to sickle your foot here. Yeah, and then you're gonna press to your right big toe ball mound. Keep your right toes pointing outward. And then that left hip, imagine that there's somebody standing right at the top of your left thigh, right? And then just slowly take your right leg out to the right. Now, Stephen, because that riding crop, we just put it to use sometimes, but he knows as a result of that to keep his right hip from lifting towards his right shoulder. I guarantee 90% of you watching will need to move your right hip to the end of the mat more and suck your left thigh bone to your left hip socket. I can guarantee it. Right? It's a lot like the owner of Men's Warehouse. Remember those commercials, yeah? All right. And then what this should feel like on the left side is freaking core work, right? It takes effort to keep that left hip down, to keep your left thigh rolling in, the tail lengthening. And you see with Steven, in his front ribs kind of naturally splay forward. If you see me walk around, you see I do the same thing. He's doing a freaking stellar job of keeping his low ribs hugging in. Now, he can maybe flare his toes a little bit more. Most of you will need to press to your right big toe ball mound more. And there's a sense of from your inner groin to your big toe, you're elongating that line. Hug your right hip to your left ankle, right? And then give it a shot. You can keep the strap around your foot for another few breaths, or you can release the strap and hover your foot. And what Stephen does here is his right foot has not dropped. Most of you will have to pick your right leg up off the ground, right? So this is not a flopping practice. Maybe right leg lowers a little bit more, and you know what? Press in my hand. Come out, come out, come out, come out, come out. All right, take an inhale, and then exhale, slowly come back up to center. Right? Bend your knees, bring your knees to your chest. Right, just take a moment, let your low back round, let it feel good. And then, yeah, a nice sigh of relief is important here. And if I haven't mentioned it, or I think I mentioned it once, keep breathing, please.
Yes, sir.
Right, I'm in a silly mood today, so it's gonna show. All right, and then left leg to the ceiling. Actually, and then right leg just straight to the end of the mat. So Supta Padangusthasana 1 and 2 on the second side. You see he's angling himself a little bit. And again, just start, really get even. And what most of you are gonna find is that the one side is a lot more cooperative than the other. For me, when my right leg is lifted, I'm like, oh, I got this is cool. And I do it on this side, and it's like, I don't got this ain't cool. You know, so it's just, it's a work in progress always. Don't let anybody ever tell you otherwise. If anybody says that there's this point of perfection, I'm gonna just say it, they're probably full of shit, right? But that's my opinion. I have a lot of opinions. I try to keep them somewhat contained, maybe not so good with that today. Right? And then let your left shoulder lower away from your left ear. Right thigh rolls in, tail lengthens. Nice. And again, do you need to hug your low ribs in a little bit? And then it's gonna be those front ribs hugging in. In my own practice, I find it's incredibly important to open the inner groins to kind of have that containment. If I don't have the containment, the adductor system doesn't open as easily. Right? And then just a little spit. Move your left hip away from your left shoulder. Suck your right thigh bone actively into your right hip socket. In fact, squeeze that right heel down. Yeah, and then again, your left leg stays pointing, quote, straight up. Spin your left toes outward, your left knee outward. Right? You should feel your left hip. And I'm going to demonstrate it standing up. Soften away from your left shoulder. And then slowly, left leg, and try not to let the foot sickle. Right? So for the inner groin to really open, that big toe ball mound. Other way. Peel this. Yes. Right? That big toe ball mound has to press like into a gas pedal. Right? Nice. And you see how really austere. I mean, the level of concentration here is a beautiful thing. His hips are staying really even. He might like a centimeter lower that left hip away from his left shoulder. Right? And then just slowly bring it out. And you can tell he's working. Right? You can see it in his, really in that kind of careful movement. He's working to hug his low ribs down, and there's this subtle turn of the right ribs to the earth. Right? So again, on that right side of the core, it is core work. That right hip is hugging in. Right? And keep pressing through that left big toe ball mound. And and I'm actually going to have him do after this a second round of this, which I'm hoping that the stuff in between he the strap that he has is long enough. Most of you at home, you might need to link 2 straps together or just use a 10-foot strap. It really depends on the openness of the inner groins, the shape of your pelvis, you know, how much movement, what they call abduction that you have, right? Those of you that have been abducted by aliens, you should be good because there's a lot of abduction there. I know jokes, they get worse. Right? You should see, like even teaching the Zoom classes, you know, online classes, it's just, people just shake their heads and just, oh shit, and then they, you know, we proceed. Right? So about 3 more breaths. You can let your left leg hover if you want. Right? And again, this is extraordinary. This is real strength, in my opinion. I don't need to tell him that because he's doing this work and this is hard. Right? But there's a sense of the right thigh rolling in, your tailbone lengthens. And you see the shape of his back, the shape of his torso, the shape, the side to side length, you know, the length of the sideways, the coronal pelvis and the coronal plane, it hasn't shifted. Take 1 more inhale. Exhale, bring your left leg up, bring both knees to your chest, and round and squeeze. It should feel pretty good in the lower back after that. And, you know, and here's the thing, again, it's not a flop, right? If your core is not stable as you begin to move into this, at least you're probably going to circumvent some of the most important parts of the experience. At most, you set yourself up for really risk of injury and unnecessary wear and tear over time. My hypermobile friends, you know, really lengthen the low back, width across the low back at all times. All right, take the strap and don't worry about unlooping it. What I'm going to have you do is just pull the loop very tight. Yeah, right, so that we just save a little bit of time doing that. And he does this really meticulously. For me, it's just like I tear loops in half the times. Anyways, so you're not going to need the loop. What you're going to do is take your legs up straight up to the ceiling, right? And then take the strap around. Let's say the balls of your feet again, right? And then start with your feet together, and then slowly begin to take your feet wide here, right? And then even wider, like wide, and bend your knees a little bit here, right? So it's like he's kind of moving into a happy baby. Bend your knees a lot more. Yeah, so notice the happy baby here, right? Also known as breaker of death pose. It's a real thing, I promise you. Right? So if you're in that metal mood, you call it breaker of death. If you're in a warm, nurturing, ish mood, you call it happy baby. It's the same thing. And then, so you see the inner groins lengthening, and what I'm going to have him do is keep the strap. I'm actually going to adjust it ever so slightly, see if we can keep it right at the big toe ball mount on each foot. And then very, very slowly, I'm going to have him press through his big toe ball mounts to straighten his legs, right? And then he can allow for some more slack on the strap if he wants, right? So that he's in this wide-legged folded position, but pressing through his inner groins. He can take his legs wider if he wants. Again, in his case, I would, all things equal, rather him have a 10-foot strap than an 8-foot strap. But that's a personal opinion. It's like he's like right on the border. I use a 10-foot strap for it, even though my legs don't go this wide. It allows me to make sure my shoulders relax. And one thing I'm going to ask him to do, and most of you will need to do this, pull your shoulders out of your ears farther. Right? And he kind of turns his elbows forward, which is great to turn on the lats. I love it. Right? Flare your toes a little bit more, everybody. Press through your big toe ball mounts, everybody. Can you feel it in your adductors at all?
Yes.
Okay. Right? And that's yes, and it's, add explicatives in there. If you didn't see his face, there are explicatives added. Take an inhale. All right, and then slow exhale. Bring your legs back together, bend your knees. Okay. And let the strap go for just a moment. And again, hug it in. Right. And so you get a little rounding, release the low back. All right. And then let's try right leg to the ceiling once again. And I'm going to have him experiment with this, because what I'm basically going to have him do, and I'm going to actually just make an argument here for triangle and side angle. So his right leg is extended to the end of the mat, left leg is extended to the end of the mat, his right leg straight up. You do the same. You watching, the ones that I seem to be pointing at by looking at the camera. All right, take both ends of the strap into your right hand. All right, now, if you're taking, let's say, triangle pose, right? That right leg, especially as you go into the back leg, right? Left leg, it's abducted a bit. Take your left leg out to the left. Keep your left toes and left knee pointing straight up. Now spin your right thigh out. Up, come up. Turn your right toes out first. Other way. Yeah, so your knee and your toes, you get them to point out, and then keep your left hip on the mat. Slowly extend your right leg out to the right. Right? And then you may begin to feel it. Do you feel it in the inner groin slightly?
Yes.
Okay. Which one?
Left.
Left. Right? So we're adding an inner groin stretch. Guess what? If you were to square your hips in triangle, both legs would be on the ground. You notice how his right leg isn't on the ground, and this is somebody with naturally externally rotated hips. You don't square your hips in triangle or side angle. Take a slight bend in your right knee. Press your right leg to a ball mound. Right? So as the right knee bends, triangle, side angle, and then slowly spin your right knee out. Yes, re-straighten your right leg by pressing through your right leg to a ball mound. Right? And then, and Steven's done this at some point, we'll introduce it on the video, with a broomstick or a dowel behind your back taking triangle. It's that same oblique work, I think, on that left side. He agrees, and that's a sign that he's not going to want to be in the posture too much longer. The more emphatic the agreement, usually the less time that folks want to spend in the posture, for those of you that teach, right?
Yes.
Right. Exhale, bring your right leg all the way up. Right, and then just take your left leg straight forward, bring your right knee into your chest, and just take a twist. Right, and then any twist that works here, so it's just taking a supine twist. Right, and then that's just something, because this outer glute muscle has been working like nobody's business in a lot of that, right? The piriformis, gluteus medius, and gluteus max a little bit, but probably not as much by any stretch. Right, that's what's helping, right? To turn the thigh out. So what you're doing is you're stretching all that. Right, slowly back to center. And then the good news is that there are only two sides. Right, so he starts in the Supta Padangusthasana 1, which is left leg to the ceiling, right leg goes straight to the end of the mat. And then he's gonna, take both ends of the strap into your left hand. And spin your left knee out. Press your left leg to a wall mount. Right, so when you go into this posture, he's going to take his right leg out to the right, and he can turn his knee out more other way, not other way. Yes, this, and then so you see his left hip roll away from his left shoulder. As he goes into the posture, he's going to press his leg to a wall mount. There's a real tendency, it's not just with him, it's most of you doing this will want to sickle your feet. So peel this back, not other way. Right. Yeah, more. Right, so you're pressing through the big toe ball mound as you take your left leg out to the left. Right, can you spin your left thigh outward? Right, and I haven't had him do this before, so we're doing some adjustments on the fly here. In fact, I don't take this variation of the posture often. I was doing this at home just an hour ago. Right, and then most of you will need to hug your left hip to your right ankle. Yes, yeah, so that there's a sense, again, right, so the left side waist elongates, the outer right core, right, the right obliques, the right TVA, transverse abdominis is working. And you'll notice his right toes are pointing to the ceiling, which they should be, right? Because your back toes, you don't turn your back leg out in these postures. Why? Dual external rotation does what? Sticks your tail out, right? Top rim of the sacrum crunches in, the ilium just kind of right into the sacrum, so it messes with the SI joint, so we don't do that. Right? And he's not doing that. He's playing with letting his leg float, which is an amazing thing. I'm gonna have him press his big toe ball mound into my hand a little bit, squeeze your left hip to your right ankle. There it is. And so he gets very even, right? And again, right, left leg is off the ground, right leg is on the ground, so his hips would not be square in this posture. Exhale, bring your left leg all the way up. And again, into the twist, you can hug your knee to your chest first, do a little release across that lower back. Right, so there's not going to be any down dogs in this. I know a few folks dealing with wrist injuries, and just, in case you just don't feel like doing down dog, you feel like staying, on the ground, right? Staying well grounded. Right? Different from being grounded when you were a teenager. All right, take one inhale, Exhale is going to bring you back to center. And then again, both knees to your chest, right? And just kind of squeeze it in. You might even touch your forehead to your knees or take your head in between your knees, right? And what this really is here is you really curl in, right? And then, you know, heaven forbid you're ever on a plane going down. What this is preparation for is putting your, right, and kissing your ass goodbye. The jokes, they don't get better, but sometimes they get well timed. All right. rock up to standing. Yeah. Nice.
Get rid of the
straps
strap
first.
first.
That could be weird. That could be really weird. You ever get tangled in a strap while you're practicing? Sometimes that happens. A good way to get around that, one is to have a wall behind you.
To have the window shut.
Yeah, the window. Yeah, if that window was open, that would have been bad. We're like 8 stories up here, so it's like.
Whew. All right. Onward.
Right. But a good way sometimes to get around this is if you cross your shins doing that. I can't do this without crossing my shins. Maybe I'm gonna get close to the window just in case. Right? So just kind of cross your legs as you do this. And see that difference?
I did it that way the first time so you could demo. All right.
See, that's it. There's great cohesion here. And then just for the sake of exploring this, triangle pose. You know what? I might have you first face in this direction. And just take your right toes, point your right toes to that slightly cracked open window that saved you a moment ago, and step your left foot back. Right? So just right into it, and I'm just gonna have him place a block to the outside of his right foot. I'm gonna do it myself, just as I'm here. Right? And then again, right? So what do we learn from lying on the back? Right? To get very even through the hips and all this, and the size of the waist, that left hip needs to swivel forward. And then reach forward and into the Trikonasana. Right? Nice. And then, let's see. Actually, this is good. Makes you doing great on the sideways stuff. This is really good. Right? You might press a little bit more through each big toe ball mound. Yeah, and that back leg turns on. And then, you know, those of you at home, if you want to do this, try to reach your bottom arm, your right arm forward. Right? So you find that, oh, your core has to hold you up. Guess what? You're going to turn your left ribs to the ceiling. Right? And that's those same core muscles lying on your back. There they are again. All right, place your right hand down or take both arms overhead. All right, and then very slowly bend into your right knee. Take your left arm over your left ear. Side angle. Right? And then, you know, again, you'll notice that line. Right? Here it's a little bit more of this sense of, you know, maybe the left leg isn't quite so abducted, right? Because what happens is his hips are tilted. It's a little bit though. Right, which isn't a bad thing, it's supposed to be, right? And there's a sense of rolling your left ribs to the ceiling. This is good, right? And then can you lean your heart back just a little bit more, right? So it's the same thing you did lying on your back, just standing. You might feel different sensations. Right shoulder out of your right ear. That's the bottom arm. Yes. And then press down through your right hand, turn your left ribs to the ceiling one last time. Maybe even look to the ceiling. All right, and come on up. Right, and you see, right, in the Warrior 2, he can swivel his left hip forward, but you'll notice, so left hip towards me, and left ribs roll back, right? So the left leg is abducted, yeah, like I had him do on that second round. Oh. All right, second side. So, you know, anybody that's, and I had the Andy Carpenter, all breathing t-shirt on, but that is a little bit wet from the rain, so I was lent this Levi's Grand Fondo shirt. Anyways, same thing. Second.
Which he completed. First century ever.
Yeah, October of last year. Looking forward to October of this year, you know, knock on wood. All right, so that right hip is going to swivel forward. Yes, and you see how that left hip just pulls back? That is fucking beautiful. Reach forward, Trikonasana, triangle posture. All right, so it's the same thing. And again, and he does a great job of beginning to hug his low ribs in. This is good. This looks really fucking good. I mean, sorry, I'm like, it's not that it never looks good, but there's like this crispness to it. It's really just showing in the practice, you know, I think mentally in terms of the breath, so energetically, right? And then maybe press a little bit more through your left big toe wall mount, which is why I had him doing that with his foot in the strap, right? So that there's a sense of consistency here, where we're going from a specific system. The idea is that, especially this variation where he's really good about the right side of the core, elongating the inner left groin, it's meant to be an adductor opener. Hi, Mom. You know, this is for her, you know, Diana Bauman Mario, right? At her request, right? But a lot of y'all need this, right? Maybe tailbone anchors, he's reaching his bottom arm forward, he's reaching his top arm forward, and then comes up in a warrior two briefly, left hand down, right arm over your right ear, side angle. And, you know, truth be known, you know, different variations, arm can be inside, outside the leg. I love hand to the outside on a block. We could call it the classical variation. I think that there's a little bit of merit to it for those of you that practice in the Iyengar or the Ashtanga systems. But also what it does is it, you know, trains you to use those outer glute muscles to open the inner groin. And it trains you to press your left hand down. Well, really it's the first part. The second part can be done to either side, but you press down through that left hand, turn those right ribs to the ceiling more, and that left shoulder. How far can you get it from your left ear? See how much extra space there is? Hug your low ribs in as you do this. Nice. Nice. Take an inhale. Exhale. Slowly come on up. Right? And again, you'll notice, right? That right hip is swiveled forward. Left hip is pulling back. Tail can anchor. And then the littlest bit, you know, in the warrior two, as the tail anchors, can you roll just your right ribs back? So right at the line of the belly button. All right, come on up. And turn all 10 toes to face towards me. You can angle your toes out an inch or so if you want. Fold forward. We'll call it Prasarita Padottanasana. And if you need to open your front shoulders, you can use the strap. You can interlace your fingers at your low back. Just kind of get everything a little bit more open, shoulders out of your ears. And you know, if you need to squeeze your shoulder blades together to help open those front shoulders, please do. All right. All right. And then slowly come on out. All right. And you can just heel toe your feet together. And any way you want to make your way to seated, you're welcome to do so. Some of you might move through Cobra, up dog, and then come on down. But what I'm actually going to have Stephen do, well, one, since he's taking the time to do this, I'm going to have him jump through to a seat once he gets back to down dog. That was smooth. I can't do it quite that way. Nice. And then for him, he doesn't need this much elevation, but I think it will help for the sake of the video. I'm going to have him sit on a block. And I'm going to have him take, I'm going to give him the Sukhasana variation, even though I know he can go a little bit more intense. So Sukhasana, and I'm going along the lines of what Annie Carpenter and Chuck Miller, who studied with Patabi Joyce, co-founder of Yoga Works, and so forth, what they call Sukhasana. So it's a little different. Right? You'll make a cross with your shins. They'll be parallel to the front of the mat. Let's just say right shin in front. Yep. So, and then Stephen's knees are going to angle out a little bit, but a little bit less than he's doing. So try to get your feet to the outside. Yeah, and then the shins forward, right? So they don't angle in. And then what you'll do is you'll press a little bit through your big toe wall mounds, right? And then just slowly begin to even ground your thumbs into your hip sockets first to begin to fold. Right? Shins can go more forward, so it's less of a diagonal. Yeah, even more. Yeah, there it is. And then rolling forward. Right, so for him, maybe a blanket, and then hands can come down when you're ready. Do you get a stretch in your other hips from this at all?
Yeah.
Okay. You can place your hands down if you want. You can have your forehead on a block if you want. Actually, for you, I would kind of maybe even recommend that. Right, and then try to, and you see, he does this marginally. I do this excessively, but less rounding in the back here. Right? Yeah, so as you pull your heart forward and try to roll forward on your sitting bones, for me, I do get it in the outer hips, right? And then I'm actually having him use this, and single leg pigeon doesn't do a lot for you, does it?
Mm-mm.
No, and for him, and my theory behind it is because of the shape of his pelvis. For me, it's Jesus. It's something. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's something to do with matrilineage. Right? Sorry, I couldn't help it, right? So it's just, you know, just kind of coming forward and have them come up and just switch shins. And then for our purposes, well, I'm actually, since I'm having them do this, and you know, if those of you that are pretty open, you might try to stack your shins instead, right? You see, I got to do this and my knee is way up. It takes about 5 minutes to lower.
Like so?
Yep. And for him, it's like, it's just looks extraordinary. He can fold forward when he's ready. Move your left or right shin forward a little bit. So both, and this is called Agni Stabhasana or Stambhasana, right? The fire log pose. Some call it double pigeon, not to be confused with double dragon from Konami. Take it back to about 1985 there, I think. Nice. And again, there's a sense of elongating the front of your spine as you fold forward, right? So the idea is to begin to open the outer hips and the low back. Right? Most of you with tighter hips are going to take the first variation. You will need to press through your big toe ball mounds, right? So you, to the best of your ability, try not to sickle your feet. The reason why is if your feet are sickling and your hips are tight, there's no, the muscle that helps support the outer knee joint, peroneus longus, it's not engaged.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of opening the hip, all it does is create kind of an incongruency between the shin and the thigh. Which, you know, think of it, right? Your knee is a hinge joint, right? So it's lateral pressure. What happens with too much lateral pressure over time, right? It weakens, you know, the structure, right? So more press to the big toe ball mound, right? And there's a sense you should feel the outer shin muscle turn on. A really good posture to work on that. One-legged balance is a standing leg. Side plank is incredibly helpful for that if done well. Operative part of that phrase, if done well, and not slacking, not kind of sagging.
If I push my toes, ball mound, into my the back of my arms by my below my tricep, I can feel it open up my whole back.
Whoa, that's amazing, actually. Thank you. Right, and for if you didn't hear, what he's saying, he's pressing through his big toe into his tricep, and it's helping to open up his whole back. And then slowly come on up. Nice. And take your legs, stretch your legs forward, and remove the block you're sitting on. And you can bend your knees for this or do this with straight legs. You're just going to lift your hips up. Shoulders are going to open up. Most of you are going to bend your knees, right? Pressure your big toe ball mound. So Purvachanasana, right? The intense eastern facing and front body stretch, and just slowly lower. Nice. And just notice how he keeps his heart open as he does this. Brilliant. And then I'm going to have him rock up, and we're actually going to have him take pigeon, more for demonstration purposes of the video than for his benefit, because like we've just established, a single leg pigeon doesn't really do for this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that this is fairly, and I might even give him more props than he needs. I'm going to have him start right leg forward. Here's the deal. If you feel like lying on your back and taking figure four is better, you're welcome to it. Right? And then I'm just going to have him come in the single leg pigeon with no props. Right? And then we're going to experiment. I'm going to give him 2 parts of a variation. You'll notice his right side waist is a little shorter than his left. Right? So what I'm going to have him do is I'm going to have him lift up a bit here. And this is, again, maybe even way more. Most of you, I'm going to recommend taking a block or a tightly folded blanket under your right sitting bone. Right? And then some of you, and there's a couple students I know, and I'm actually somebody that benefits from this as well. Right? And you might have to play, do one or the other or both or a little bit of each. Lift your left thigh up. So tuck your left toes, lift your left knee, more. And I'm actually going to take this other block, place it right under his left thigh, right below his hip. Right? For some of you, you will find that that helps to open your low back more. You know, there's one person who I encountered really recently through the Zoom stuff, where, you know, her left hip will drop lower than her right on this side, right? And I didn't have a prop under the right sitting bone. Some teachers will say that's not a good idea. I do really recommend that your sitting bone is touching something, just so as not to overstretch. You know, when I had her prop the left side, right, what it did was it, you can untuck your toes, sorry. What it did was it actually helped, gave her more sensation across her low back and outer hip. Some of you will place, you know, your forehead on the backs of your hands. Some of you might try to pull your heart forward a little bit, you know, in this posture. And you don't get any sensation, do you?
Little.
Little. Okay. Where do you get sensation?
Right groin and lower back, middle back.
Interesting. And did that start with the block? The
No,
middle?
it started when I moved forward with my head.
Interesting, right? So what we see is, instead of kind of collapsing the front body, pulling your heart forward, it gave me some sensation in the middle back, and I'm thinking that elongation of the front body, a little hugging the low ribs in, adds the inner groin. Again, many folks, this is just an outer hip, you know, outer glute stretch. For myself, for Steven, incidentally, we're both cyclists. It's more of an inner groin stretch. For me, it's both. It's very intense in both, right? So it's not that there's something wrong, or it's just a question of, you know, really how the connective tissue is in your body and the various muscle groups. You know, what are you using more of? You know, what's your posture, etc. Right? Take one inhale. Exhale, let it go. And then just take your time and come to the second side when you're ready. Nice. And you might take a very brief down dog. You can lean to a side and, you know, remove the props first and swing your legs around. You know, do-si-do a little bit if you want for the second side. Nice. And there's one thing I'm actually going to have you do coming into it. Nice. And then I'm going to give Steven a slight adjustment, because you might see that right hip is a little lower than the left. Right? Do you mind if I take my...
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to take my left thumb into his left hip crease. You might actually do the same at home. You can do this to yourself. Take an inhale. And then exhale, clear the flesh of that left hip crease to the outer left hip. How's that feel?
Better.
Better. Right. So instead of having to prop his left sitting bone here, and then again, the idea is usually you do to one side what you do to the other. It's a lot like an algebra equation. But, you know, on occasion, you know, and for demonstration purposes, in this case, I'm only going to have him prop the other side. I want to see if this makes a difference for him. So don't use that block. Just tuck your right toes, lift your right knee. Nice. And I'm just going to place this here. Nice. And try to pull your heart forward more. How's that feel?
Good. It's more, for me right now, it's more in the groin.
More in the groin on the left side.
On the left side.
Right. Nice. And again, just the littlest bit. Can you move your left sitting bone to the earth? Right. And maybe, and you see how his head kind of has to reach to get to the ground. For him, maybe backs of his hands, maybe forehead on a block might be good. Right. So for those of you at home, you know, notice how his head is now more even with the rest of his body. My teacher Annie will say that you know, it allows the neck to release, right? It's a little bit better for the central nervous system. Okay. I'm going to give him several breaths here. We can insert my ramblings about this, that, or the other thing, whatever you want. We can talk today about maybe the Major League Baseball negotiations going on. We get the season started in July happening, and you know how the Players Association is not really feeling the revenue sharing and pay restructuring. You know, insert something. So just take one more inhale. Exhaling. and then you can come on out here. And what I am going to actually recommend to come lying on your back and take supported bridge, just to open those front hip flexors. This has been a lot of hip flexion, a lot of core work. It doesn't need to be a really big hip opener or front hip opener, but just something to counter all of this stuff that's been going on the whole practice, right? And so just something to kind of feel the front hips relax or open, breathe. Right? And then, you know, again, just in the interest of time, what I'm going to recommend here is maybe about 2-ish minutes here. Right? You might take a final twist afterwards and really just gently lower yourself into Shavasana corpse pose and take as long, you know, I honestly find I need like 8 minutes, bare minimum. You know, you might utilize other options before you get there, like going to the ceiling, etc. Right? But like I say, just in the interest of time and our time constraints, I'm gonna let you do what you need to do to wrap up your practice. On behalf of Dr. Stephen Hartman, myself, Adam Meringolo, you know, have a great day, and we'll catch you next week. Namaste, y'all.